Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is having a good week. I want to thank you all so much for your emails and comments under our latest video about the Australian branch and their participation in the war effort during World War II. Now, before I get into the video, I just wanted to make a couple of corrections. Apparently, I accidentally uploaded the draft version of the video because I had gone back through and done a re-edit and edit out some of the things that we said that weren't correct. So I apologize for that, and I did not want to take this one, that one down and, re-upload it because it took 20 hours to upload. But just a couple of quick corrections. I had said that 1914 article was in several newspapers, and at this point it's only two that we could find, and one was the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and the person that found that wanted to remain anonymous, so thank you for that. And then of course we know the other one was in a New York newspaper. So I just wanted to make a correction on that. And then I had said Rutherford was in Australia to release the book Children. And this is the clip that got me all confused.
An exciting event for the brothers was a visit by Brother Rutherford in 1938. Brother Rutherford boldly gave the talk entitled Freedom or Romanism. Intense efforts were made to censure his public talk. He became the centre of great publicity, and as a consequence, 10,000 came to hear him, with only 1,300 witnesses in all of Australia. While giving a talk to the brothers, he asked, "Where are all the children?" going on to explain that their place was with their families. Consequently, all the children were brought in to sit together as families. No more Sunday schools.
So he wasn't there to release the book Children. He was talking about children being in a separate Sunday school. But he was there at the convention and was giving talks. And like we said in the video, he was okay with everything that was going on. Now, I want to thank Adam very much. He sent me some information because his grandparents knew. They were there in Australia when this was going on, and so he sent me an email with a little bit more information. And thank you, Adam, for giving me your permission to share this with everyone, because I wanted to read this. Great to see your Australian historical video. My grandparents were in Sydney, Bethel at this time. So they were in the Sydney, Bethel during this time period. My grandfather, who was an electrical engineer, also ran the technical side of 2HD radio station in Newcastle for Watchtower. Long story, which I won't go all through at the moment, but a couple of points. My grandparents left the radio station as it became a party house. So it's great getting this actual history, from people who were there and then who told their families and can carry on this oral tradition. So it became a party house. The radio announcers and other popular people were partying all the time and drunk most nights. Much of this happened when they became a mainstream station and gained popularity with non-witnesses. As you mentioned, they were not broadcasting Watchtower articles at all. And that was right in the Watchtower and the yearbook that we had read, that these radio stations were now being used for commercial programs, including horse racing. And if you haven't had a chance to look at our video, the one right before this, please do, because there's a lot of history that we read that was right in the literature. Bethel took pioneers out of the witnessing work and opened up quite a few businesses even before the war. As they had experience in printing, they opened up 2 commercial printers for profit printing. And as we know, the Watchtower in your book mentioned that too, that they had opened up printeries and pig farms, canteens, army canteens, several other things. And yeah, during the war, these pioneers were put into work with bandage rolling and preparing medical supplies for the army. So it wasn't just the army canteens and, washing and pressing the uniforms. Now they got them rolling bandages and preparing medical supplies for the army. They became an authorized supplier of medical goods for the army. No wonder Knorr was so upset. The farm, which is now where Bethel is located, increased farming and sold food to the army barracks next door. It just never ends. It never ends. My great-grandfather was farming there at the time. So, his family was involved, and part of this. So, this is great, like I said, because this is history right from a family themselves. My grandfather couldn't cope with the hypocrisy and basically faded then. He opened up a jewelry store after the war, and Bethel would bring in donated jewelry from deceased estates for them to sell for Bethel. They claim a huge amount of money alone came from donated jewelry. Wow. One day a circuit overseer came into his shop to have his watch repaired, and he questioned my grandfather why he wasn't being seen at the meetings. He questioned the CO about why smoking was allowed, why they supported the war effort, why pioneers were being used for commercial work, not witnessing, if the end was so near. He was upset he was put on the spot by my grandfather, and they disfellowshipped him the next week. How sad, to shut someone up. But I also wanted to, I've got some more information here right from the literature of how, what happened afterwards. Like we said, our battery was dying the other day, and it was already an hour long, so, we didn't want to cover that, so this is kind of like, adding to that. By the way, I sent much of this information to Ralph Furley with quotes from the yearbook. I compared this to what is happening now with the governing body and the commercial activities they are involved in, such as building work after disasters. Also does the same thing. It takes pioneers out of the witnessing work and into money making. He replied to me and said he was astounded, as had never heard of the Australian history, and he agreed it applied to the governing body. And Mike and I were talking this morning while he was making his breakfast. And same thing today. We mentioned Jajari. Go back to some of our older videos. We have a playlist of Jajari itself. These are nursing homes for the elderly that is run specifically just for Jehovah's Witnesses. And it is a money-making commercial business. Look at their real estate empire. We mentioned that. And so many others that we don't know about. In Australia, right in their documents, they mention Watchtower travel. So, there's so many of these side businesses that Watchtower has their greedy little fingers in. So they really didn't stop, the commercial activities. And look at how many pioneers are taken out of the preaching work, like he mentions, for the relief work, who are sent to, build kingdom halls and remodel kingdom halls. When Mike was a regular pioneer, he loved being able to be in the regional building committee and go around and do all this, because you know what? He could still count his time while building these kingdom halls. So it's basically the same thing. Now, I have the 1947 Watchtower out again, and this was the June 1st. Now, right before the resolution on page 173, they mention an article in the April 15th issue of the Watchtower. I just happened to have the April 15th. And they have an article in here about mercy and forgiveness. And they're pushing all of this about how Jehovah's great and he will forgive you and anyone, his servants, of anything they have done. He mentions David, and all the sins he committed. And I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But I just wanted to cover something real quick here on page 123. Under the subheading, plucked out of the fire. And it's talking about in 537 BC, God restored a Jewish remnant from captivity in idolatrous Babylon. He spoke of it as brand plucked out of the fire. Now, if you skip down a couple of lines, about a third of the way down in the paragraph, it says, He preserved a faithful remnant for himself. That was true back in the prophet Daniel's day and also in the days of Jesus and his apostles. It is true also in these days, since the setting up of Jehovah's kingdom by Christ, AD 1914, that year marked the beginning of World War I. At its close in 1918, there came forth only a remnant of devoted Christians who offered themselves as Jehovah's Witnesses and took their stand wholly for his kingdom and began preaching it to all the nations as the one and only hope for all men of goodwill. See, this goes along with Jesus inspected them and found they were the only ones preaching the good news of the kingdom. So all these other religions, all these other people in the entire world weren't doing what the Bible students were doing, Jehovah's Witnesses, going on. During the First World War, those of this remnant had been guilty of considerable religious folly and had therefore failed of their duty in a serious way. So, if they were just as bad as all these other religions, then why did Jesus pick them specifically? If they were still committing religious folly. Now we know back then, they still believed in the cross. They were still celebrating holidays, including Christmas at Bethel, celebrating birthdays, smoking, and a whole long list. Yep, committing religious folly and had therefore failed of their duty in a serious way. But yet God chose them specifically. They are the only ones that are God's remnant and chosen people. But God read the hearts of this faithful remnant and had mercy upon them and spared them. Well, why didn't he have mercy on everybody else? Why didn't he cleanse everybody else? This is so arrogant and presumptuous. Just like Jeffrey Jackson testified before the Australian Royal Commission. Very presumptuous. They're committing religious folly, but yet Jesus chose them because of their hearts. You mean to tell me that nobody else had a good heart condition? This is crazy. It really is. This is just crazy. Thus, figuratively speaking, he restored them to their land or rightful place on earth. Now, still on page 123, I'm going to go over to the second column, paragraph 39. Now we are in the post-war period following World War II. The faithful remnant have survived also the war under God's marvelous protection. But as to those associated with or identified with the remnant, a heart-searching question arises. Have any of these come through the Second World War spotted and stained with folly engaged in during the stress and pressure of a total war that regimented the vast majority of the people? Despite all the revelation of truth and counsel that were given in between World War I and World War II, did any yield to the worldly organization at war and conform themselves to the world and turn aside from the God-given commission to preach and serve God's kingdom? Doubtless some did. Now remember, Rutherford was okay with this. So this is including him in this. Rutherford, the president of the Watchtower Bible Tract Society, obviously was not free from spot either. Of course, we know he wasn't, you know. During Prohibition, when he wasn't supposed to. Yeah, I digress. If so, then it is time for such to confess to having put forth their hand to iniquity and seek Jehovah's forgiveness through Christ and turn from such folly and now set themselves determinedly to pursue the righteousness of his kingdom. Then it goes on to talk about faithful Daniel confessed the sin of his people in hope of an early restoration. So we can see, with this article that, they knew they had to regain Jehovah's favor if they even had it in the first place. But I wanted to go back to this June 1st, 1947 magazine, because after Knorr did the resolution during that same convention, there were 6 assemblies held throughout, Australia, and they had promised that they were never going to put their hand forth to inequity again. Page 174, paragraph second to last on the bottom. The period of trial upon the Australian brethren brought with it some gossip and suspicions or lack of confidence among the brethren. Well, yeah, I guess so. Which did not contribute to the progress of a theocratic service. Brother Knorr's talk was followed in the evening by discourse by Brother Henschel on the tongue, its wrong and right uses, which subject was most appropriate and fitting as well as greatly appreciated by the brethren. In addition to this information, he gave timely illustrations of how the tongue was used rightly by our brethren in Europe and what blessings came to them because of the right use of the tongue. This admonition was gratefully received by the brethren present. They would not gossip, but would work for the unity of the organization throughout the land of Australia. See, and that is the thing, is then they had to squash the gossip and talking, because then everybody would find out what was going on in Australia, and they couldn't have that. And I think this is why Adam's grandfather was disfellowshipped. They couldn't have him talking about all of this. See, and that's what they have to do. That's why Mike and I were disfellowshipped and why so many others are disfellowshipped. They do not want us talking to our JW family. This is why, like our moms, will not listen to us because they think we're apostates with apostate lies now. They have no idea that it's right in, the Watchtower literature, admitting some of these things. Now, on the back of this Watchtower, page 176, they have that there was a letter to the Kingdom Publishers in Australia in the March 1947 informant. Now, I don't have that particular informant, but this is what they look like. They were the precursor to the Kingdom Ministry or the Kingdom Service. And there was one specially done for Australia. And I just wanted to mention real quick, because it's quoted in this Watchtower. Third paragraph down. During the period when brethren were engaging in commercial enterprises, some consecrated persons were caused to stumble or turn aside from their service of preaching the kingdom gospel. Now remember, this came right from the top hierarchy in the Australian branch. They were the ones that was bringing pioneers out of the field to help in these businesses. supporting the war effort. So this went right up to the top. Just like the Australian Royal Commission a few years ago. It went right up to the top. Right up to Terence O'Brien. Going on. There were a number who had entered the pioneer service to give their full time to praising Jehovah and whose attention was diverted therefrom to the things of the world. This had left a shortage in the number of full-time publishers in Australia. And then they're asking if anybody can to pioneer. Now, something else, when I was going through information, and remember we had mentioned that the government seized the branch's facilities and supplies and everything there in Australia. We happen to have the 1947 yearbook. On page 64, branch service. I did not know this. The government and the military authorities have now paid compensation for the seizure and occupancy of properties during the ban. This has been given wide publicity in the press and radio, thus helping to break down the prejudices that some people still hold. The Society's premises at 7 Beresford Road, Strathfield, have now been restored to first-class condition, and the office is again located in the main building. Checked on that address. It's been sold. It's apartments now. But their numbers were still going down even after, they're begging for Jehovah's forgiveness. Now, I just wanted to cover something else real quick. We got our elders letter for August. Announcements and reminders. And I'm not going to read this because it's several pages. Because of the 2021 Memorial and Special Talk, because of the uncertainties of safely holding large gatherings in 2021, direction on local arrangements for the memorial and the special public talk, including the invitation campaign, will be provided at a later time. Interesting. Also, the Saturday afternoon convention is up on jw.org. I know some of you are doing videos, your thoughts on those. Also, a large print New Shepherd the Flock God book, Shepherd the Flock of God book. There we go. The Elder's Manual, large print edition, will be distributed on jw.org in PDF format. Oh, and you knew they couldn't do an elder's letter without talking about donations. Adjustment to resolve congregation donations. The resolved monthly donation referred to in the announcement for congregations is based on a monthly per publisher amount suggested by the branch. Now, we covered that, back in 2014 when they forgave everybody's Kingdom Hall loans. It was supposed to still be paid, and they had an amount per publisher. It still had to be sent in. The single monthly donation to the worldwide work will replace the resolved donations previously remitted in support of Kingdom Hall and Assembly Hall construction worldwide, the global assistance arrangement, and any branch-specific arrangements. Instructions for congregation accounting, the S27 form, related accounting forms, and the funds transfer page on jw.org will be updated in due course. The per publisher amount listed on the jw.org webpage containing the link to this announcement should be multiplied by the number of active publishers in the congregation to determine the suggested monthly donation for your congregation. It is understood that some congregations will not be able to donate the suggested amount while others will be able to donate more. Therefore, the body of elders should consider whether the suggested amount would impose a hardship on the congregation or the congregation is in a position to donate the suggested amount or more. The monthly donation agreed upon by the body of elders should be presented in a resolution to the congregation for approval. Please note that the resolved donation should be sent on a monthly basis and not as a single amount for the service year. So now they're wanting these month to month instead of just a single amount for the service year. Makes me wonder, are they beginning to hurt for money? Don't know. And then, of course, they have the resolution written out. Okay, direct debit on donatejw.org. It is practical to designate one elder as a contact for those that request help using this new feature. Then number 10, fraudulent withdrawals from congregation accounts. This was interesting. Unfortunately, cybercrime is currently also detected more frequently in connection with congregation and maintenance accounts. Due to current incidents, we would like to point out the importance of keeping a close eye on account activities in order to follow up on incomprehensible credit notes and withdrawals. Therefore, we'd like to remind you of paragraphs 5, 6, 19, 55, and 60 of Instructions of the Management of Congregation Accounts, Form S27B. These paragraphs contain some checking procedures that may reveal possible discrepancies in case of conspicuous activities. And you, Jehovah's Witnesses, will be hearing the congregation part of these announcements at the next midweek meeting, probably this week. There's more tutorial videos for congregation accounting, adjustments to resolve congregation donations. So that about covers the news for now. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And like I said, your emails and comments, it's great. It's great. And we're working on several other videos. Like we mentioned in our previous video, we're working on one on that article where the Bible students did not say 1914 was the beginning of Christ's presence and him establishing his kingdom. They actually believed that was going to be the end. So, and if you haven't seen that video yet, it was right before the one we did yesterday. It was like, what is Watchtower lying about their history? Because we feel, yes, they were. Yes, they were, especially that from that article in 1914. So you all have a great day, and we'll see you later. Bye.